Those of you who particularly enjoyed the epic Battle of Vega shown in the Squadron 42 CitizenCon live reveal may fondly remember the moment that Squadron 42 made an appearance. Whilst the Second Fleet of the UEE Navy was busy battling the Vanduul Armada, the plucky Hornets and Retaliators of Squadron 42 performed their quantum hop towards the Kingship, eventually unleashing a lethal spread of torpedoes. Whilst it seemingly took the Vanduul somewhat by surprise, the attack is an interesting example of what might be described as the Carrier Doctrine of the UEE Navy. Let me explain. Go! I'm Forrester, and I'm an armchair enthusiast of Squadron 42 and Star Citizen, finding some of the naval themes particularly interesting. And that holds true of the way that the Battle of Vega II unfolds. We'll start by looking at the ship types in the Second Fleet, the different roles they might perform, and how the attack unfolds, then considering some of the other sources of information out there. To be clear, I've not played Squadron 42 at this point, much as I'm looking forward to being able to, so the content of this video is made up of musings from an enthusiast rather than an expert, but hopefully interesting. So let's start with the makeup of the Second Fleet, which had a range of capital ships at Vega II. Whilst this video explores the UEE Navy Carrier Doctrine, many carriers don't operate alone, instead usually fighting as part of a strike group with a range of escorts. Amongst the most numerous of these were the Javelin-class destroyers, a channel favourite which seemed to fulfil the role of multi-purpose escort. Combining reasonably sized anti-ship turrets with a well-placed suite of anti-fighter and anti-munition turrets, the Javelin makes for a potent protector. Whilst it does carry a hangar bay, it's better suited to a gunship like the Redeemer than a large air wing, and perhaps operates in a similar way to a helicopter pad and hangar on contemporary destroyers. The Javelin also carries a suite of very heavy torpedoes, representing significant destructive power. More on that later. Also present in significant numbers were the Idris-class frigates. These ships do incorporate a primary hangar, running the full length of the ship, and form the basis of part of the Squadron 42 campaign, with players posted to the UES Stanton. The main hangar works well for a flight of 3 fighters, such as the Hornet or Gladius series, or perhaps the Gladiator torpedo bomber, although Star Citizen players often bypass the recommended 3 and can load a few more aboard. The Idris also features a size 10 railgun, providing a forward-facing punch against larger enemies. In a fleet role, the Idris seems to fulfill the dual role of augmenting the air wing with additional fighter-sized craft and providing additional fire support in the main axis of battle. And then, the centerpiece of the fleet is the carrier, in this case the Bengal class. The Krugeri is shown in the Squadron demo, although Squadron 42 are ordinarily based on the UES Paul Steed, so it's possible that that ship was somehow present too. The Bengal class fleet carrier is a huge ship, where the Idris carries fighters, the Bengal carries a whole air wing, including a range of Hornets and Lightnings and Gladiators, and most significantly, the Retaliator bomber. The Tally is a significant step up in torpedo armament, and being able to deploy these from a carrier, restocking them if required, brings a lot to a fleet battle. More on that later. Additionally, the Bengal also has a range of turrets, including large battleship-style railguns for ship-to-ship engagements. The Second Fleet also had a range of support vessels like the Hammerhead, which provide additional capabilities, such as additional anti-fighter and anti-munition platforms. But the clincher in the battle was the Carrier Doctrine. Let's talk about torpedoes. As much as the battle started out with many large ships hurling various sizes of lasers and ballistics towards each other, the Baguette of Boom was undeniably one of the big damage dealers in the battle, particularly on the UEE side. Some of these were lobbed out forward-facing, like those from the UES Gauntlet, but such ordnance had to navigate the forward field of battle, running a gauntlet of their own to avoid being taken out by flak, point defense, and even enemy fighters. Accordingly, the torpedo is very much an all-or-nothing munition, and being able to hit an enemy from a flank is a significant advantage. That's where the Carrier Doctrine comes in. The main battle force holds or presses a line, locking the enemy force into dealing with them, whilst a flanking force is able to move around and engage in the soft underbelly of the enemy. This is a classic battle tactic, going back thousands of years and not limited to naval engagements. But the fact that the UEE Navy can deploy gladiators or retaliators to be able to move around a battle and put size 5 or size 9 torpedoes into an enemy flank is a huge advantage. As seen at the Battle of Vega, doing that in a surprise fashion whilst simultaneously opening a shield hole was enough to turn the tide against the Kingship. And distinct from the larger ships which take longer to do it, carrier-borne craft are able to get in and out more quickly and somewhat callously without risking a more expensive strategic asset. But of course, it's not as simple as fly around, fire torpedoes and go home for tea and medals. Despite being surprised by the quantum hop from the 42nd Squadron, the Vanduul force immediately deployed fighters to deal with the threat, and so a key part of the Carrier Doctrine is to have fighters of your own. In this case, it was to provide a fighter sweep to deal with enemy fighters and establish space superiority, before then whittling down some of the defences. But earlier in the battle, many fighters can be seen flying a combat air patrol around the Second Fleet, being ready to engage enemy fighters, bombers, probably boarders in the case of the Vanduul, or even enemy munitions. It certainly seems that despite the multiple big guns of the UEE Navy, carrier-borne craft play a significant part in fleet operations. That's not unlike the evolution of fleet doctrine in some Western navies during and following the Second World War. The loss of a significant number of battleships at Pearl Harbor forced the US Pacific Fleet to do more with naval aviation. The raid on Pearl Harbor itself was of course enabled by the air groups of the Kido Butai, which, hot on the heels of the raid on Taranto, proved just how effective carrier-borne attacks could be. At the start of the Second World War, battleships were the pride of a modern navy. By the end, it was the aircraft carrier that held the crown. And for many NATO forces, that continued into the Cold War. But it was not the only way. Whilst the Red Fleet did have a couple of, what would they call them, aircraft-carrying missile cruisers, because if it's a missile cruiser that happens to carry aircraft, it's allowed through the Straits of Bosphorus. Most of the focus in the Red Fleet was on overwhelming missile defences by overwhelming missile firepower. Missiles too numerous, too fast, and perhaps too unexpected to defend against. To that end, in the Star Citizen universe, it doesn't follow that a carrier doctrine is always going to be the only way to fight. There may be alternatives too, but it certainly seems to be central to the current doctrine of the UEE Navy. Interestingly, most of this video has focused around large fleet engagements, but we also see smaller detachments, often with a single capital ship, sometimes with support elements. Situations like the UEES Stanton operating largely solo, using its carrier capabilities to increase patrol effectiveness, or the UEES Warhammer deployed to Stanton with a small number of escorts. So it seems that even in the UEE Navy, there's an acknowledgement that tactics need to fit the circumstances of the theatre. But nonetheless, the fact that a single pilot in a small fighter can still be a hero is probably important to many of us who are excited for Squadron 42. Anyway, at the risk of going on too long, if you got this far into the video, I hope you enjoyed the musings of this fanboy as much as I enjoyed putting it together. I look forward to reading some of your thoughts on the UEE Navy Carrier Doctrine in the video comments, and if you're not yet subscribed to the channel but like this kind of thing, perhaps click that too. But otherwise, and as always, thank you for watching.